Welcome to ACC Nation. That's Will Ogenin, and I'm Jim Quist. Thanks for joining us on podcast, streaming radio, and YouTube. Well, where does the ACC stand in postseason basketball action? We start with the shot heard around the world, and it's still going. Around and around we go. And where we stop is that's how many teams from the ACC men's side we have left in the tournament. And if you're not watching YouTube, it's a big fat zero. Duke, wow. All I can tell you is that Braylon Mullins made a shot that he will never forget. He'll be sharing it with his grandkids and anybody who will want to listen. And it was a phenomenal shot. 35-foot three-pointer to clinch the win over the Duke Blue Devils. What do you think of that game?
Wow, huh?
Yeah.
All right, that's enough. Let's move on. Oh.
Okay. Yeah.
No, this is the Duke. Let's go this way.
Mhm.
Duke has 4 losses in the last calendar year, and in all 4 of them, they blew double-digit leads. Final Four against Houston last year, and then 3 times this year. The Texas Tech game in December where they had a 17-point lead. The UNC game in Chapel Hill back in February, they had a 13-point lead and lost. And now a 19-point lead in the Elite Eight.
Before you go any further, let me ask you what the common factor is in all of those games.
Inexperience, like,
And who's
and
coaching?
the coach,
That's
I
right.
think. And full disclosure, I'll promo. I was on the All Sports Discussion podcast with our friends Matthew and Jeff on their most recent episode, and one of the things I brought up, just kind of hypothetically speaking, if Caleb Foster was healthy, I wonder if he would have been in there for that final possession instead of Caden Boozer.
Oh yeah.
It's possible, the fact that Foster even came back for the Sweet 16 game, nothing short of a miracle. But and what the common theme is in all this is, as you said, John Shire's the coach and he hasn't been able to get him out of it. But at the same time, you're relying on a lot of young players who, you know, are still immature and unsure of what to do when in a situation like this, when a team makes a major comeback like this and, you know, ends up, just messing up the whole thing. And they don't know what to do. Like we saw this like a panic move just a few years ago. K.A. Clark for Virginia against Furman tried something similar. It didn't work, and they ended up losing. Same thing happened here. It's I'm not even I'm still kind of in shock 24 hours later at that. I've watched the highlight 50 times and at least 50 times, maybe more. And I'm still like, how does this happen? I mean, you've got the best player in the country, along with, his twin brother, these other freshmen, and, who were one of the most talented teams, been one of the best teams in the country all season. And then in a pressure situation, you choke again. Like I feel for Caden Boozer. I really do. Like I even like the way he even spoke about it in
Yeah.
the post game. Like he took it and he understands, yeah. Like in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have done that. And hey, maybe this happens again and he learns from this experience. And I in the end, these are, yes, as much as we can, celebrate, a lot of people nationally are celebrating Duke losing, but we have to remember that these are kids still. They're 18, 19, 20 years old, and they're not robots. They have feelings too. So I just don't think you should be too hard on these kids for this.
For those of you who did not get to see the game, basically it ended up this way. There's 10 seconds left on the clock. Now, prior to prior to Duke having possession of the ball, it was 72-69. One free throw shot um, made it 72-60. Duke leading, or rather 70, sorry. And so this is where we are right now. Okay, we've got 10 seconds left on the clock. First throw in, and of course, UConn is pressing. And first throw goes into Cam Boozer. And Cam Boozer is not going to move the ball. He's basically passing it back to the guy who threw it in, who then throws it to Caden. Caden is just about at half court. Suddenly he's swarmed by two defenders. He's looking at a situation where he has two guys wide open on their side of the court. And I can understand his immediate reaction there, right?
Mm-hmm.
I, again, these are younger players. He's first year, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I look at it this way. Again, I think this falls on the coach. This is the type of thing that if Coach Shire had not gone over this thoroughly with these folks who were on the court and said, "Look, man, 10 seconds. We're ahead. The only thing that we really need to do here is just move the ball a little ways up the court. If you feel like you can't get rid of that ball, let them foul you. Put yourself in a position to foul you. At that point, move forward from there."
Mm-hmm.
And it would have ticked off some time. I don't know if that conversation was held, and we'll never know unless somebody on the
Yeah.
team says, "Well, no one ever told us that," right?
Right.
So here's what happened. Caden's got the ball, two guys defending. Caden goes for the up and over pass to one of the guys down court. And the guy on UConn, I've never seen anybody leap that high in my life. He had some adrenaline pumping in him. He got up, swatted the ball, went to another UConn player. That UConn player tossed it back out to Mullins, who then shot. I mean, I'm thinking there's no way he's hitting this. 35 foot. It's a three-pointer, nothing but net. Totally nothing but net. At this point, you're looking at the clock and it's 0.3 seconds. And I knew it had to back up to at least 0.4, maybe 0.5, which is just enough that maybe you could pull off a similar play. And there are some players on Duke that I know that can shoot very accurately from half court, but they kind of have to have some space to do it. It just wasn't enough. 0.4 seconds is where the refs put it, and it just did not work out. That was the end of the line for Duke. It was a great game. The only thing that I had any issues with there was when you're up that far on a team. It says a lot about Coach Hurley and his squad. They're fighters, and they came back and they won that game. They
Mm-hmm.
won it fair and square, man. They fought for it, but at the same time, I keep looking at Duke and I'm wondering, how have you had this many games where you've lost that big of a lead and people have come back on you, and that is sort of a running theme. So again, if anybody wants to point a finger, point it at the coaching staff, because those are the folks who are directing these players how to or how not to get in trouble. and to come up with wins. So, I will just say this: congratulations to Duke. They did a great job this year. They had some amazing players on that team. I think that Cam is gone. I think he's going to the NBA. I was just reading something about that, and that also Caden is going to probably stay at Duke, which is
Hmm.
probably a good idea. Caden is a hell of a player.
Yeah.
He's overshadowed by his brother. It would give him an opportunity to really stand out and show people that he's a hell of a player too.
Yeah, and his game really stepped up when Foster went down with that injury at the end of the regular season. He had a really good ACC tournament, had a really good NCAA tournament up until that point. And let me just throw this in there as well, Jim. In the first 33 minutes of that game, UConn was 1 of 18 from three, and it hit four of their final five over the last 7 minutes of that game. It's just crazy. And I see a lot of people talk about, Duke was hardly called for any fouls early on. Then all of a sudden they started calling them and wondering if the refs maybe changed the way they were calling the fouls. And quite frankly, I don't want to get into that discussion because quite frankly, I, it's always a slippery slope trying to bring officials into the conversation, and I didn't think they were that bad. I thought they were fine. I mean, they're gonna miss calls, and you
Yeah,
got, you got Duke over here, who everyone thinks gets all the calls, and then you got Dan Hurley over here, who's a sleeping psychopath. Had to catch myself there for a moment, but
yeah. But he's having a grand time in his own little world,
yeah, no kidding.
and that's fun. And the people who are UConn fans are enjoying it as well. So, I can't take it away anything from any of these two teams. They just played a lights out game, and it was fun to watch. I know it was painful at the very end for Duke fans. And those folks who don't like Duke, it was enjoyable, and UNC fans, etc. And there's a broader list. Um, but overall, great run, and it's a shame it you know with any game, somebody's got to win, somebody's got to lose, right? I mean, it's just the way it is. So we'll see what transpires with this team. Who's coming back? Who's not coming back? And if it's going to be another one and done sort of situation for John Shire and the Duke Blue Devils in the future. So we'll see
Yeah,
how that
and
plays out.
well, I know they have a recruiting pretty decent recruiting class coming in again. I'm pulling up. They have the number one recruiting class again. They have four commitments from recruits, all like 4 and 5 stars. I've got three of the top 15 coming in. It depends on who obviously it depends on who you look at, but like I just have like rivals on three and 24/7, and all three of their four in the top 15. But a lot of people have also said that the talent in this class is down compared to some recent years. So, and just looking ahead at Duke's roster for next year, they're going to lose some big pieces. Malik Brown, who was one of the who is ACC Defensive Player of the Year, is going to be he's gone. We talked about Cam Boozer being gone. Um, Foster has a year left. I think he might come back. Gamba might come back. I'm not sure. Isaiah Evans, I think he's probably coming back, and I think they're going to I think Sar might come back. Dame Sar. And maybe they run it back with a lot of this team, and then the freshmen, they're still going to have to probably go into the portal for a piece or two. But you know, it we're 7+ months from the start of the
Yeah,
season, so a lot's going to
yeah,
change. I mean,
that's right.
there's going to be so much turnover in these rosters in the coming days when the portal opens that it's going to be really hard to speculate too much beyond the end of the season right now.
Yeah, and we talk about how with the NIL and whatnot in the portal. how you really cannot project that far out. And it's amusing to me because I mean, we've been talking about this as being a factor in football. And I've been looking at all these teams that are doing their spring games and training and and the amount of stuff that is out there that you can read has diminished incredibly. Even the clickbait has just absolutely sort of just just really come down when it comes down to football. I'm sure it'll start clicking back in, no puns intended, as we get closer to the fall. But um, there's just so many ifs, ands, and buts with sports that, I mean, nobody can talk uh, authoritatively about stuff anymore, and unless you're right in there with the team and you're spending every day with them, which nobody press doesn't do that anymore, man. In fact, we're lucky to have anybody from media covering sports anymore, the way things have been going. So on Saturday, April the 4th, will our Final Four, UConn and Illinois and Arizona and Michigan. And I know that you've been talking about Arizona as being your favorite.
I love this Arizona team. They had a Michigan's going to be a real tough game with that for them, though. Um, I've talked multiple times on my personal TikTok about my love of this Arizona team just because of the way they kind of buck the trend of in a lot of ways because they don't rely on the three-pointer in the same way that other programs do, and they'll shoot it and they're decent at it. They're like up top, like right around 100th nationally in three-point percentage. But they're old school in that they like to be physical inside. They'll drive to the basket, draw fouls, get to the free throw line, and earn points that way. And
Mhm.
their defense is really good too. Their their matchup of Michigan, obviously Michigan is just a really good team. They're in a lot of ways similar. They have they have Yaxel Landeborg, who's really good. I mean, Elliot Cadeau, former North Carolina point guard, is their guard, and he is been pretty good this season, a little bit up and down. He does have his tendency to turn the ball over at times, but he's doing a lot better this year. And like I said, they're a little more reliant on the three than Arizona is, but they can certainly definitely pound it inside as well. But yeah, I like I said, I love Arizona has been my pick to win it all for pretty much the whole season. I've just kind of like grown more and more in love with this team, and I really think they're going to be the ones that cut down the Nets on Monday, and a week from recording.
Yeah, it's this UConn Illinois game intrigues me from the standpoint that I believe the Illini are really going to give UConn a what for here. I just don't think that they have been getting enough attention. Um,
The so yeah, anyways, the thing about Illinois is they are the number one offense in the country. This is a really team that can just score a lot, and we've seen it throughout the course of the season. You know, look at the tournament. They opened up the tournament by putting 105 points on Penn. Um, they have several games over the course of the season. They've put up 100 points, and they put up 101 on USC in February. I mean, they're also they have the tallest team in the country. They just bring it a lot of size, and a lot of it too is the emergence of Keaton Wagler, their freshman who was like a top 150 kid who has really blown up this freshman season. Um, a veteran like Kylan Boswell, who's been around the block as well in the backcourt with him. He's been good. And then Andrei Stojakovic, who's, obviously we know he played at Cal, and his dad was a longtime NBA player, Beja Stojakovic. And then they had these other guys who came from the Balkan area, David Mirkovic and Tomislav Ivicic, and they have a lot of players with experience, and they're, like I say, they can score. They're not as good of a defensive team as UConn is, but like I said, they can overcome that by scoring a lot.
Yeah, I think that height is going to make a big difference in boxing up the middle, really choking off the lanes. That it seemed like UConn was just eating Duke alive at times in the paint, and I, I kept scratching my head. How is it that you can go through an entire game and have somebody penetrating like that, and nobody stepping up and making a change or addressing the issue? So that's part of the reason why I think Illinois is, at least in my book, is a favorite over UConn. I see Illinois and Arizona as being the two teams in the championship, and as you mentioned, that's on Monday, April 6th.
Yes, should be a fun game. I mean, no matter who's in it, whether it be Illinois, UConn, or Michigan and Arizona, a lot of stories to come out of this, and I'm very excited to see what happens. I'm also kind of sad that the season's almost over.
Yeah, I was looking back and we're almost, not quite, but we're going to approach close to a month of postseason play, and I was just thinking to myself, boy, that was fast. This has been such a phenomenal postseason. It's been so much fun. Let's skip over into the NIT. They have New Mexico and Tulsa and Auburn and Illinois State. That is going to be on Thursday, April 2nd. Should be some interesting basketball action there. I'm not sure. Uh, to be frank about it, I think Tulsa is the only team that's been, of course, not this team, but as a team, has ever been in the NIT championship before.
Maybe I know they changed where um the championship is. They're now playing at a Hinkle Fieldhouse where Butler plays, and that should be it should be interesting. There's you've got Auburn in there who's a lot who they tried really hard to get into the tournament, but didn't get in. They are taking on Illinois State, who definitely had a real shot to get into the tournament, but they lost in I believe it was the Missouri Valley title game. And then you got New Mexico, whose coach who might be a very hot commodity here in the coming years, and Eric Olin and Tulsa, who's a really good team as well. They've won 29 games this season.
No slouches there. Let's slide on over to the WBIT. This is an interesting uh, mix. I was just watching just a few moments ago before we started the program. BYU defeated Kansas, so BYU now is in the championship. They're going to be facing Columbia, who defeated Wisconsin early on today. So that's going to be on April Fool's Day, Wednesday, April 1st, the championship for the WBIT, Columbia and BYU. So it should be a fun game to watch. I think BYU to me stands a little bit more of a chance here in coming away with the championship of this game. Will I I don't know that much about Columbia, so I may be misspeaking just a little bit, but I have seen BYU play, and I can't help but think BYU is the team to be watching here, ultimately.
Yeah, and the Ivy League has been a really good league. I mean, they've had multiple bids the last couple of tournaments, if I'm not mistaken. And Columbia obviously had a shot to get in this year. They finished the season 24-8, so they're definitely no slouch. But yeah, you're probably looking at BYU as probably being the favorite in this game.
Let's get into the women's NCAA tournament. UConn defeated North Carolina and Notre Dame, so that puts them into advancing. UCLA defeated Minnesota and Duke. They'll also be advancing. South Carolina will be taking on TCU, who defeated Virginia 79-69. And Texas will take on Michigan, and Michigan defeated Louisville 71-52. So we have no more ACC teams in the conference or in the NCAA tournament, but a lot of great teams this year, and nothing. I know it's disappointing not to go any further, but um, they played some phenomenal basketball. If you look at the overall record and how some of these teams advanced postseason,
Mhm.
it's really been something. And I'm in some instances I'm a little surprised that teams made it as far as they did, and one of those is Virginia. I keep going back to them because when we were talking earlier in the season, it was like, how is this team ever going to make it to a tournament based upon everything that we're seeing? And this was months ago, right? Well, they did something right, and they went pretty daggone far. And it's been a phenomenal season for the Wahoos.
Yeah, I'll come back to that in a second, but I wanted to touch on a couple other things on the women's side. That Notre Dame upset of Vanderbilt. The stat line from Hannah Hidalgo in that game was just eye-popping. 31 points, 11 rebounds, 7 assists, 10 steals. She had a triple double with steals. That's just outright crazy, but she's amazing at that. And then the Duke three to beat LSU at the buzzer.
Mm.
Whew, boy.
Oh, man.
The thing was going around and around and finally went in and boy, that was nothing sweeter than seeing Kim Mulkey take an L.
Very true. It's funny how many people across the spectrum. That's basically all I was seeing on X.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, I wasn't just don't really care about Duke, but boy, watching Kim Mulkey suffer a loss was just phenomenal. And I'm
Mhm.
going like, wow, people do
Yeah,
not
no
like
kidding.
her. Not
Yeah, so no, I was just gonna add on the Louisville and Virginia both losing on Saturday, both had similar issue in that they were outscored significantly in the third quarter of their games and when they were in tight at the halftime. I mean, Louisville was only down 5 to Michigan at halftime, but the Wolverines outscored them 25-13 in the third quarter, while Virginia was actually up by 1 at halftime, but then TCU outscored them 24-11 in the third quarter. And we talked about Virginia, they had done something that hadn't been done yet in the history of the NCAA tournament, going from the first four to the Sweet 16. And, it was an unbelievable season, all things considered. We thought, we talked about this, off and on throughout the course of the season. Remember, they had that loss to UMBC, and you're like, oh, this program's not going anywhere. And they started to play better towards the end of the season. Then they fell off a little bit again, but were still able to get into the tournament. And then once you get in, anything can happen. Now, as far as the Elite Eight games, yeah, there was a tall order for both Notre Dame and Duke to get in. UConn was up 9 at the end of the first quarter and just felt like no, Notre Dame could just never get back into the game at all from there. And then Duke was actually up in the at halftime on UCLA, but uh, UCLA outscored Duke 39-19 in the second half and ended up cruising to victory. Another great season by the Blue Devils. They got off to such a slow start this season and really came on over the course of the season and then finished 27-9. They just another great season. Same with UConn. A team that was inconsistent to say the least at points throughout the season finally picked it up late in the season and ended up making the Elite Eight. And they're both and had phenomenal seasons.
one thing I'm there are certain characters in basketball or any sport you may not particularly like a coach for one reason or another, but I tend to respect them all because of what they've accomplished. I can't say that I was overly fond of Coach Krzyzewski, um, but I always admired the man for what he was capable of doing. The same thing was with Coach Gino at UConn. Um, and I will give him big credit for his comments in regard to the tournament, and how things were handled and how they could be better. Women's basketball is something that should not be second rate in any way, shape, or form. It is just a phenomenal sport. There's some amazing, amazing stars in women's basketball who are just an absolute delight to watch. Um, and as they moved into the WNBA, same thing. I mean, it's just been great stuff. Um,
Yeah,
and
and I was just gonna add on real quick, in I thought Gino Auriemma made a lot of salient points with his rant there. And he definitely had a point about the balls were just weird on in both the men's and women's. Like just the way they were, there's inflation issues and just way they were. It was just, yeah, nobody seems to like the basketballs they were using in the tournaments at all. But it was really important for the women's game to really build off the momentum of Caitlin Clark and what she did to elevate the love of the women's game. And yeah, I don't know where I would how I would grade the situation, since then. They've done there have been some things that have been done better, but I still think there's a lot of work to do.
yeah, quite a bit. One of the things about the basketballs, this is something that you'll find is being addressed in middle school. And most definitely by the time you get to high school, they're checking the basketballs. Okay. They're making sure that they're bouncing properly, they're bouncing to the right height, they check the air pressure, the whole 9 yards. Good refs will do that prior to games. And I'm sure that that's probably the case for the most part here. But when you're doing practices and other things and go arounds, uh, you need to have balls that have been checked. And you really shouldn't have people who don't know or understand basketball running tournaments of any kind or being there in a support, in some fashion or another, being there for support. Um, and that's the thing is I look at that kind of stuff, and that's just um, that blows my mind. I mean, that some of these issues that were brought up, and they may seem petty as hell to people, but you know something. Um, this is like I said, this is kind of stuff that you start doing back in middle school and even before that. If you're a really good ref, you're checking that stuff in pee wee leagues and stuff. You're making sure that everything is the way it should be. Okay, that's just part of being a professional. Now, you said you would not say anything about the referees. I will. I believe that there was inconsistency in um, a lot of what they were doing. I'm not saying that they were favoring one team or the other. I just felt as if, you know, did these folks have enough experience coming into a game of this level to do a really professional job? Um, I there was uh, that question was raised by TV Teddy on his podcast. And I agree. I just I'm wondering, what are you guys doing?
Hmm.
This stuff matters, and like I said, it may seem small, trite, whatever. Uh, again, and I'm not saying that they were, for one team or the other, and fans can say that all they want. Uh, but there were some inconsistencies that were called on almost every game that I watched. Men, women, it was like, what is going on here? I don't think I've yelled as much at my TV during some of these games, and it was for both sides. During that Duke UConn game, I was yelling at the ref for stuff they were missing for both. It was just insane. And some of the stuff that was also being said by in one particular instance, the analyst was completely wrong, but kept saying the same thing over and over again. And if you know your rules, and I will tell you, I don't know every single thing there is to know, but I have spent years studying rules for basketball because I coached. And I've also gone to referee schools and sat in and made sure that I listened and watched to understand how the process worked. Okay. And I've got a lot of friends who are refs, and they're, all the way up to the NBA. Okay. So, I listen to what they say, how they do things, and I was just seeing so much stuff that was a mess. And I don't, you know, until people start taking this stuff seriously and really address it, and I think in part it has to do with you have, it's like with anything in life, you've got to give people the proper education and experience, and you've got to pay them properly. That's the one thing I don't think that is done. I don't think referees in any sport in the United States, maybe everywhere, but definitely all the experience I've ever had, they're not paid enough. So you're getting what you pay for. All right. And I'm not saying that, they're crap, but because a lot of them aren't. Most of the people I know are pretty damn good. Um, but that's got to change. That's at some point or another. That's really got to change. I mean, and it's got to be soon, because if everybody can see it and it bothers them, and then you're getting former refs making comments about it, and I mean, you can call into question TV Teddy all you want. I mean, but the man, he's got a lot of experience, a lot of understanding of the sport, and you have to respect that. You know, he's seeing stuff, he's calling it out, and at that point, when you get that kind of stuff going on, hey, something's got to be done. So that's that. That's my soapbox.
Well said, Jim.
Well, we will be back about a week, and pretty much wrap up everything, have a look back at stuff, and there's some other sports that we're going to be talking to. Uh, Will may be popping in and out depending on what his activities are. I may be doing some solo interviews with people in different sports like softball and baseball, rowing, uh, lacrosse, you name it. So we're going to be having a little bit different look, and then we'll pick it up and keep going. And it's not going to be too much longer before we're looking at the beginning of, again, our football previews.
Yeah. Which, speaking of, I'll just throw in there. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, I was on with Matthew and Jeff doing some Frozen Fork and some college basketball talk. I'll actually be on in a couple of weeks again to start previewing Virginia football for them. So,
Yeah,
no time like the present, I suppose.
that's right. It sneaks up on us. That's all I can say, and
Yeah.
it's quick. So that should be fun. We'll see how that all turns out. Um, so be sure to check out Will. He's on TikTok and a lot of other social platforms with a lot of great thought and talk about what's going on in sports. We always enjoy watching. And you can check us out at accnation.net. You can hear us on streaming radio on the podcast. Be sure to subscribe, and on YouTube, and be sure to subscribe there as well. And until next time, cheers.
School.